Hey guys, it's Alexandra. Today we're going to be talking with Brendan, who is going to be giving the male perspective on feminism. We're going to be touching on everything from the toxicity of the patriarchy to objectification of women in society, double standards in relationships, and polyamory. So I hope that you will stay tuned to check out the rest, and you can subscribe for more videos. All right, thank you.
Eeny, weeny, teeny, weeny, shriveled little short dick man.
There are way too many overpossessive men. Cause your insecurity's showing. If you don't like the fact that your girl wears something and you won't let them, there's a huge problem with that. I know a lot of guys back from my hometown that won't let their girl wear a lot of things out in public, and I think it's absolutely fucking pathetic, and it shows a lot about their insecurity and character over anything else about their relationship. Also come from a super conservative area, so the girls just deal with it. I understand not trusting the other guys, but if she loves you, it shouldn't be an issue at all. That's all. Let's piece this together. You decided to pick a man based on his looks, probably with the same personality made straight out of Red Flags, and you expected a different answer. Could you please elaborate on how that makes sense? It doesn't make sense. People don't cheat because they're pretty. They cheat because they choose to cheat. That's it. That's all there is to it. I find this video to be an entire double standard. It has 400,000 likes, but if a guy did this and said that he dated a fat girl and she still cheated and he went buffering, the world will lose its shit right now. Let's discard the other person completely. Let's forget their personality and their looks. Now you're the problem. Now you're the common denominator here. Have you ever thought of that? So you might be the problem, but don't choose people based on their looks, because their looks aren't going to change exactly what they're going to do. Do better and have a good day.
It's really hard nowadays for me to even consume anything because everything gets canceled in like 5 seconds. So it's like hard for, when you see a lot of creators that have loud voices and strong stances on things, it's always intriguing to me because I'm sure your response isn't welcoming all the time. What kind of responses do you get from your videos?
I get called a pick-me. I get I don't know. I've had a lot of men just kind of shit on everything that I say because they don't want to believe it. It's kind of a part of either how they're brought up or what they just don't believe in, I guess. And I counter it for the most part pretty well. And a lot of times I don't even have to argue. Somebody else in the comments will argue with them. I just kind of let it flow. I can't really feed into it too much because it's extremely draining. So
Yeah.
I just don't deal with it at all.
Yeah, I think it's tough because like we live in a society where if it's just weird coming from a woman to see dudes that are respectful of women are somehow that's also bad. So it's like you don't respect women, you're bad. You do respect women, you're a simp or whatever you are. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really toxic place to be.
I
So
agree.
how do you think like growing up or with your experiences with relationships, how have you been able to get to the place where you are now where you're very conscious of the objectification of women and you're educated on it and you're able to speak on it and give that advice?
This is kind of just how I've actually been asked this question before. It's kind of hard to answer because I think it's a lot of things playing into just my entire life. I was raised by my mom after my dad had left for a while. I grew up with sisters. I grew up with brothers. All my friends growing up had been sexually assaulted or something of some degree that's not fun to think about. You just kind of become aware of the things being raised in a house with 3 girls, you see it more. Before my sisters came in the picture, I didn't see it near as much, but then I realized like after living with them, you kind of see it more and more. And most of my best friends have been women. So I've always been there to listen and be there when they're in pain because, they go through things. I've just always kind of had this mindset. Men are pretty much pigs. And it's not anything that they've said specifically. It's just everything I've seen collectively. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
Um,
that whole narrative too of like all men are trash. I think would you consider that a fair thing to say? I see that a lot online, and I think like especially among the younger generation, it's like very trendy to hate men. And I can like I'm not sitting here saying all men are perfect, but do you think that's an unfair kind of narrative to spread around?
Not really, no. I've been saying that men are garbage for years, and I honestly, I was probably the first one to say it before I ever heard it. So I don't know what that says about me as a straight man, but I just, you see enough and you learn enough by witnessing, you know. I mean, guys crack jokes all the way as young as second grade that are objectifying in some way, which I feel like they all learn from their homes. And then it just progresses. Sometimes it gets worse, and sometimes it gets stagnant, and sometimes it doesn't progress at all. I think it depends on who that man is surrounded by. I think it depends on how susceptible they are to listen to the voices that are hurting around them.
Yeah.
You know, I can feel the pain when people talk to me about their problems. I know what it's like. I don't want anybody else to suffer through some of the things that I've heard. Especially as somebody who's been depressed more than he's not been depressed his entire life. You learn that you don't want people to feel the way that you felt. So when you hear stories of other things, you learn that you don't want people to feel like they felt either.
Yeah. I think it's also an interesting thing to navigate with, after the whole Me Too movement and everything. I think as people are becoming more vocal about assault and harassment and things like that, I always wonder, like, I can see how, from a male point of view, that makes it difficult to navigate, like, approaching women and how to talk to women, because I think people are scared of being accused of things that they're not doing. What is your point of view on like that sort of communication?
It's honestly, it's really just not hard to not be a piece of shit. This narrative, I mean, I understand being falsely accused because there are terrible women in this world. You know, you can't deny that, but there's terrible men in this world. So it's a catch-22. I feel like the ones that are falsely accusing men, you know, karma will get what's coming. But on a man's side, you shouldn't have anything to worry about if you're self-conscious of what you're doing and you're aware of what is actually crossing the line and what's not. Because I feel like there's a line that is very faded to a lot of men because they don't understand what that line is. I even as somebody who recognizes a lot of those lines, I can admit that I've crossed boundaries before, but never to some degree to where somebody felt like they were being taken advantage of or they were being pushed to something that, you know, they didn't want to do, you know. And I feel like a lot of men, they feel like they have a right to do some things when they don't. They get some sort of sense of entitlement. I don't know if it comes from where they're brought up or what. But there's a very defined line between pushing a boundary and assaulting somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that that whole being afraid of being accused of something they didn't do is them also not understanding where that line actually is, because you can put somebody in a hard place to the point where they're going to go through some sort of trauma just to make sure that they're safe at the end of the day. And that's not fair to them. And that's where it comes from. It's not. And I think a lot of times it's not a false accusation. I think it's straight, you did this and you just don't see it, which is sad, but I guess we're getting better as a society slowly.
It's tough too, I think, when there's more things out there like OnlyFans and stuff, and there's just more exposure to, I've felt at least, a newer wave of like, it's empowering to own your sexuality and, take ownership of your body and do what you want with your body. And then on the flip side of that, there's men that will say, how do you expect me not to objectify you when you're out, like you're doing this? So what would be kind of your opinion on that whole thing?
I think those men are fucking stupid. It's not hard to respect somebody and respect what they're doing, because a man can sit here all day and say, oh, I had sex with this many people, and then shame a woman for it. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And I mean, I've even heard the conversation amongst men like, oh, she slept with this many people. And in my head, I'm thinking, you've had sex with your girlfriend that many times. It doesn't change anything about her. What's your point? Her value, she's not an object. Her value doesn't decrease. So I don't know. And I also never understood the whole, I hate anybody who victim blames based on an outfit or lack thereof, because any man that's been to a strip club knows that you can't touch anybody unless they let you. It's all about consent. So that drives me insane when people say like, oh, she deserved it because she was wearing this. And I was like, you probably should be punched in the face for saying that, because that's not true. It's her body. She doesn't want you to touch her. Don't touch her. It's simple. It's simple mathematics. 2 + 2 = 4. Whatever they're doing doesn't add up.
Yeah.
know?
Yes. I think, I'm sure you've had plenty of women come to you and be like, hey, thank you so much for talking about this. Have you been able to make those kind of connections?
I've had a lot of people come forward. I've had a lot of people feel safe to tell me their story that they've never told anybody else. I've had a lot of people come forward and say that their sons admire me who are under the age of 12 because they watch me through their parents' account. And I find that to be unbelievable in a lot of ways. I always wanted to change lives, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. I wanted to be a social worker, and I just wanted to help kids that were struggling, but that plan kind of went out the door. So it's nice to be able to do it from a different perspective.
So what was kind of like your inspiration to put your voice out there and make videos about? And you probably always had these same ideas, but there's a lot of people that don't speak out about it. So what kind of prompted you to do that?
My friends visited me when I moved away from Indiana, and they visited one weekend, and they're like, you need to download TikTok. And I was like, no. And they handed me their phone when I was hungover, and that was the line. They're like, on the way out the door, they go, have fun going viral in 3 weeks. And I was like, the fuck? I had no plans for this. I wasn't going to download TikTok. I wasn't going to do any of this stuff. I was just going to continue to do my thing. And then, I mean, I don't use the platform solely for, everything that we're clearly talking about. I do it for my own thing too. It's kind of my own therapy because I do move around so much. So I have to keep myself from dumbing back down into the low parts of my brain.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to do my own thing and also help others.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's interesting how you bring up in a lot of your videos, like having female friends and how that's very like, it's perceived. I think it's misperceived. I think it's people take that as he's gay or he's sleeping with all those girls, or you know what I mean? It's very, I don't know how common it is because I don't have the best experience with people that have healthy friends that are women. But I think it's interesting to see that you do it in a way that's like healthy and functional. And I'm sure, are there people that just don't believe that like that you're just having like regular friendships with these girls?
Yeah. Honestly, I even with guy friends that I grew up with, like, because growing up I did sleep with pretty much all my friends, but it wasn't at all, it wasn't just to do it. I mean, that was just how we got along. It's what we did. Which is also kind of plays into me being polyamorous. I feel like a lot of my high school plays into me being polyamorous. But a lot of my guy friends, when I said that I like hadn't slept with one specific female friend, they'd be like, I don't believe you. Why are you spending so much time with them? And I'm like, because they're a person and they're fun to hang out with. There's nothing wrong with being just friends with them. And I guess they just couldn't wrap their heads around it. And it kind of spoke volumes about how they are. because them saying that puts me at a distrust when it comes to them being around women, because it's like, okay, you have clearly one goal. It'd be different if it kind of just happened, but you have literally one goal, and that's horrifying because that just turns a woman into an object, and that's not what she is. So
Yeah. It's interesting. You would think being polyamorous would, I think when people hear about that, I still think it's not talked about a lot. When you hear about that, you think, oh, that's because the dude wants to sleep around and like whoever he's with is like not on that same page, or like, but the way that you're talking about it sounds like for you at least, it increased your respect for women.
oh, 100%. Actually, my girlfriend she does not understand my sex drive. We actually just had our like first like kind of like back and forth last night about it. She's like, I'm used to men basically objectifying me and being uncontrollably hornier on me, and you're just not, and I want to know if it's me. And I'm like, you're not an object. There's no point in time am I going to be just sex crazed about you or anybody else. It's if it happens, it happens, but that's not my goal at the end of the day. My goal is to spend time with you. So when it doesn't happen when we hang out, you should consider that somewhat of a compliment. And she admits that she's not used to that. She's very used to narcissistic men who just kind of take advantage of her at any time. And I was like, you're not going to get that from me. So that's a misconception, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Any true polyamorous man is perfectly okay with both male and female interaction on either side, because like she goes and I encourage her to go on dates and do her thing, and it doesn't bother me. But I think the men that are fake are the ones that are saying you can only do that with other women, and it's clear that they don't think that that's a fair. It's clear that they're not being fair when it comes to the idea of poly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
version of it is something that gets them off in their head. Oh, she's doing things with another woman. That's extremely hot. I don't think that's right. It's just one-sided.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's definitely a double standard. I think it's interesting to see that. I think, it is, it's hard to fight that narrative that society puts on you that you need to have a relationship that looks a certain way and one person has to be the powerhouse and the other person has to submit, and that's just naturally how it is. When would you argue that that's not naturally how humans should be
I think,
as far as like commitment goes?
yeah, no, I'm on a completely different spectrum when it comes to commitment. I mean, I think as long as there's trust and communication, that you should be able to bond with who you want to bond with. Um, and I don't think that any one person is made to fulfill all your needs, let alone fulfill them forever. So it puts a different angle when it comes to dating and breaking up, because breakups don't hurt near as much, especially with other people that get it, because you realize that your time together is up and you cherish what it was, but you move forward with it with the experience that you gained.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people think that you're supposed to hang on to it forever, but that's not necessarily how growth works.
Yeah, it's tough because I think the way that men treat women gives women this idea that like their bodies are their value, or whoever they're having sex with, they're feeding off of the attention rather than like the person, I think. So how do you think how do you navigate relationships in a way that you're focusing on the person first? Because you'll hear people say, this is one thing that I'm curious about it, because I've heard many men say once you have sex with someone too soon, then they're out of your mind. As far as relationship goes, they're not even in consideration.
I mean, I don't really believe in that. I mean, I thought I had sex with my girlfriend the first night we met. So it hasn't I don't think that that's the case. I will say that there's been petty reasons why I wouldn't date someone, but those are because I'm unsatisfied in some department of that area. I don't think it has anything to do with actually having sex with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm not going to tell them that that's the reason, because obviously if it's something that they can't control, that's not fair to them. And that would make them self-conscious about something that they shouldn't be self-conscious about. And I respect the idea of body image and body positivity. And I know for myself, like, there's some things that I just wouldn't want to hear, like if you don't like a certain part of me sexually, I don't want to hear it. Just move on with your life. So I try to pay the same respect when it comes to that. The idea that you have sex with somebody too soon and it ruins the idea of dating is a joke, because that's just a man's way of saying that he views you as an object and he just wanted to fuck you. I can tell you that by knowing any man that I've ever heard talk about it, that's just a lie. They had one goal in mind, and they manipulated a woman for it, which is sad. So
it's hard. I think it's when, like you talked about earlier, that double standard of, so it just seems to be, especially with like, I think, hookup culture, as opposed to like people seeking I'm sure of course there's people seeking relationships, but at least in my age group there's a lot of just like, people don't know what's like, I think people get past a certain level with someone like intimately, and then they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm peacing out. Like I can't, like, it's scary. I'm too involved in this person and now I don't know what to do. So I think it's a shame that it's taking people so much, like, to get to a level where, why can't you just be like that up front? I think when you're yourself and you're, talking to someone and trying to really get to know their personality and their character, unfortunately, if the intentions aren't the same on both ends, it gets very confusing, I think.
So I think that it's funny that you mentioned this. So I think that everybody mistakes sex as intimacy. I don't think that that's true intimacy. I think it's just a different form of bonding. Yes, you do have to be vulnerable and get naked and all of those things, but it's not being intimate with somebody unless like it's there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There are different acts of intimacy. Me brushing Bex's hair is intimacy. Taking a shower and washing her body for her and kissing her is intimacy. There's plenty of ways to do it. Going to do her favorite thing that I don't like is a form of intimacy. There's a lot, but sex is not the only form, and I think everybody mistakes it as the only form, which really takes away from bonding and getting to know each other on a real level, because once it happens, they're like, wow, what's there left? When there's plenty left, they're just overlooking it,
Yes. Yeah, I think that's such an important point of view, that, have you been able to connect with like any men that have the same views as you? Because I feel like maybe there are a lot of dudes that think the way you think and they just don't talk about it.
I know a few guys like me that have reached out and they're like, thank you for basically putting other men in their place. But patriarchy is strong, so there's not a lot, sadly.
Yeah. Well, I hope that there will be more in the future, because I think, I think it's a shame that it's what you're talking about. I feel is like, I get it. I agree with what you're saying. And I think I wish more people would be a little more open-minded about what they're feeling and not freak out that it's not like what they think they should be feeling at a certain point in a relationship. And I think people also really want to label relationships very quickly. They want to like have something that they can call whatever situation they're in. If it doesn't fit in like a box, that's scary to them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's funny, I had a rule that I wouldn't just hop into a relationship for at least like 3 months of knowing a person. I knew Bex a month. So I guess it really just depends on how things flow. And I've realized that more and more over time, that you just kind of have to let things flow. And if they flow that way, then great. You just let it happen. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I do think that can be a toxically monogamous trait, though, trying to force a label onto something,
Mhm.
trying to basically claim somebody as your own, trying to get them to stop seeing other people very quickly. I think that can be a very toxic thing to do, because a lot of people date around before they hop into a relationship. But on the other end of that, I think a lot of people also just choose to have hot boy and hot girl summer a lot and don't tell the partners, which makes it complicated because they're leading people on, which isn't fair. I've always been pretty direct about what I want, and I think that's where a lot of the respect comes from when it comes to interactions with other women. And I'll say exactly what I'm feeling and what I want at the very beginning. I'm not going to sit here and lead you on and think that you're going to date me when all I wanted was to like have like a little fling. Like, I'm going to tell you from the start, like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And that goes a long way. They're either going to like that or they're not. And if they don't, then we just mutually disperse. It is what it is, you know?
Mhm. And how do you think like you navigate apps and stuff like that? Like I know that communication even gets like misconstrued. How do
I
you
hate
think
dating
like,
apps.
yeah, I also hate them. So I'm just curious, like, do you think there's like a healthy way to use those?
I think there is. I think everybody just doesn't. I have terrible luck on dating apps. Like right now, I can tell the conversations are kind of genuine because I just re-downloaded them. Because I mean, I'm tired of having to travel to go on dates, and like Bex is going on dates at home, and I'm like, well, this is one-sided. But I have in my profile that directly that I'm in a relationship and that it's polyamorous and open, and it kind of immediately either shuts out the people or they're okay with it, which is kind of nice. But I mean, overall, I haven't really needed dating apps just because they've proven time and time again that they're a waste of time. Nobody's really ever on the same page, and nobody ever wants to admit what page they're really on. So and everybody says dating apps are the way to date, but you can use social media in general to find people, like Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. You can use those as your own dating app because everybody's getting to know each other regardless. So I think those are probably easier because people are more themselves on them.
So how do you, this is just a personal curious question. How do you think like in your relationship, how do you, for both of you, how do you not have like jealousy issues?
Um, I can't speak for her. I think that she probably does have some jealousy, but I don't know. We just communicate what we do all the time, and I think that alleviates a lot of it because it's just open communication. For me, I'm good with it, if that makes sense. Like it's I hate saying I don't care because those words together sound very non-connected to my partner, but like I don't care. Like go do your thing, go have fun. I want you to be happy and have fun and like be satisfied whether you're going on dates or sleeping with other people. Like I want you to be having fun and like being happy with the time that you're spending. So for me it's more of a gratification that my partner's happy. It doesn't really
So,
affect me as long as, you know, they understand that they're not in competition with me.
yeah.
You know what I mean? As long as the people that she's going on dates with, they know that they're not in a competition with me, that we're on the same, we're kind of on the same field. I'm with her, you have a chance to be with her. Don't think that you can just take her. And the same goes for me when I date. So
Mhm. So would you consider, how would you describe like your relationship with her differently than somebody else that you start going out with?
you mean like a what if right now?
Do each of you, and again, I'm not asking you to like speak for her, but when you go off and do you guys do your own thing, if you were to like, if she or you were to like meet someone else and get really interested in someone else, like what is that conversation? Are
Just
you
let each
guys
other
like,
know.
hmm,
We just let each other know. There's different ways to do poly dating. Personally, I don't care to meet them for a while. I don't care to meet her hookups really at all because like there's no point.
yeah,
But if she starts seeing somebody for a little while and she admits that she likes him, I mean, I'm gonna want to meet him at some point, because I mean, at some point we're all gonna hang out. It's bound to happen. But it also is to keep track of where the intimacy is, because we do have our own rules for the relationship. So the rules alleviate for that person if it does get serious, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting. Yeah, it's still something that I'm curious about. I don't know a whole lot about that type of relationship, but I think, it's definitely interesting to tie that into the way that you view women. And I think people would think the opposite. So it's interesting to see that. And I respect that you're open about it. And I think, to still be able to, I think it probably allows you to see like relationships in general more clearly, like objectively, to view other people's relationships when you're not like completely monogamous. Is probably easier to analyze like all the toxicity that's going on.
yeah. I kind of realized I was poly about 2 years ago, and I didn't really start wanting to date until about 8 months ago. And then now I'm dating, and like I'm just seeing like the terrible red flags that everybody else is suffering through. And I'm like, you guys should get therapy.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah. All right. Well, I thank you for joining me. I appreciate hearing your point of view. And I hope that you'll keep making videos and speaking out about it. I think you're definitely connecting with a lot of people, and that is awesome. So good for you.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
You too. Thank
All
you.
right. I'll be in touch.
Okay.